Really? We haven't beaten that dead horse enough already?
There is no such thing as too much Laila bashing.
I have things to say. But we are done with the reviews. We need to move on.
I still have anger in me. Yeah, me too. And I don't think we've given all the examples of how shitty Laila really is.
Girls, this isn't healthy. We need to read other books, meet new characters, go outside, touch grass.
Nah.
Oh, that's right. We're doing this. First of all, for those of you who are wondering what I'm currently dressed as, I swear that I had no intentions of doing this at first, and contrary to what you may be believing right now if you've seen my review of the Gilded Wolves, no, this does not come from a place of hatred. I was actually just thinking about some writing advice the other days, ones I like, ones I don't like, ones that I follow on my writing projects, and I actually feel have helped me improve my writing. And one that I'm realizing I don't particularly agree with, maybe surprisingly, is give your character flaws. And yeah, I know, really, after all I've shat on Laila from the Gilded Wolves from being too freaking perfect, am I really gonna stand here, sit here, look you straight in the camera, and tell you not to give your characters flaws? And the answer to that question is no, that's not what I'm gonna do. Have you not read the title of the video? This is just about shitting on Laila some more. But I'm gonna explain my logic here. I just don't like the idea that you have to give your characters flaws, because I feel like it just creates a trend of really insufferable characters that just end up accumulating a list of flaws that end up just being, quirky and interesting. Like, oh, she gets angry easily, or, he's cold and distant. I think for me it's like a bit of a question of nuance. The reason why I don't like this advice, I don't think you really need to give them flaws, but you do need to make them not perfect. I guess for me it's a bit of a question of terms, where I would rather say give your characters weaknesses or give them limits. They need to not always be 100% right. Let them make mistakes, and if they have an argument with someone, don't be afraid to let the other person have the last word. Maybe they don't need to come out of every situation on top. Hell, maybe have them lose their cool once in a while. And if they do lose their cool, yes, I want to understand why they did, but I don't need them to be 100% justified. It needs to come from somewhere, but it does not need to be right. Just let them be wrong. To me, it's not so much about having a list of flaws that you can use to counteract the fact that someone called your character Marisu. It's about making them human, or at least make them feel human. Which brings me, quite nicely, to Laila, because no, I haven't beaten that dead horse enough yet. I still somehow have things to say. If you haven't seen my reviews of the Gilded Wolves, and my extended rants about the books in general, and Laila in particular, allow me to recap. Laila is one of the main characters of the Gilded Wolves saga, and she is, as you may have guessed, perfect. She is a hot, mysterious dancer in a popular cabaret in Paris. She makes the most beautiful, delicious looking cakes. She is always right and comes out of every situation on top, and she delivers the coolest lines that I swear have only been written so they could end up in the trailer for the movies. If she has an argument with someone, you better assume that person is wrong and needs to apologize to her. Yesterday. And, spoiler, even the universe picks her to become a goddess in the end. It's just really difficult to communicate how overwhelming it is how perfect she is. Every chance the story gets to remind us how freaking amazing she is, the story will 100% take. And if there is no opportunity, it will create one. She is this sexy, wise, motherly figure that can basically do no wrong. If someone in the story says something clever, it's probably because Laila inspired them to do so. The darkness around them, said Séverin, closing the book before him and giving Enrique his full attention. Growth and remorse are rather like stars. The surrounding dark makes them vivid enough to notice. Invite the old curator once more and apologize. Tell yourself that next time you'll do better. Enrique frowned. I know you did not devise such wisdom on your own. Quite right. I stole it from Laila. She's just always spewing these half-baked nuggets of wisdom to other characters and helping them figure themselves out. And her worldviews are just never questioned. She is just always right, always wise, always knows exactly the right thing to do or say. And frankly, it is exhausting, especially for a main character. I do think these characters can have a place in a story as secondary characters that are just not constantly in your face. But having a main character that has the whole universe bending over backwards to show you how always right and always perfect they are is just tiring and quite frankly not compelling. In book 2, we meet a character called Eva who briefly develops a crush on Séverin, Laila's love interest, and hence just hates Laila for it. But of course, Laila just never really stoops to her level. She's always just like, oh, but it pains me that I have to be involved in such a catty conflict. So even this lame trope is used to make Laila look even better. Like, she's just too good to be jealous. And quite frankly, I wouldn't mind if it wasn't just so constant. It is really, like I said, every chance the story gets to remind you how cool and perfect Laila is, it will take. In book 2, there's a scene where Hypnos, in Laila's absence, tries to handle the catering for the rest of the team during a meeting. And of course, he's just not as good as her. He was pushing a cart laden with treats. They were colourful cookies, which disgusted Zofia, and ham sandwiches, which turned Enrique's stomach, and a steaming samovar of hot chocolate, which only Tristan drank. So Tristan, who's dead at this point of the story. Oops. So yeah, again, that just keeps pushing the narrative that Laila is just the freaking best at everything. And like I said, a lot of the scenes by themselves would be okay, but it's just a constant repetition of all the times she's just like pushed to be this surreal goddess of goodness. And also the fact that so many times other characters are just diminished to make her look better. She even gets those weird moments where suddenly she's a pro fighter who doesn't need to be saved by no man, which only sometimes. And normally I'm all for hot babes being able to handle themselves, but again, it's just another thing that she can do and where she's just gonna be better at than anyone else. Laila laughed. It was a high, false sound. I am told I have an admirer inside who wishes to greet me personally. Ah, mademoiselle, if only. The first guard leered his wrist, displaying the apple-shaped blood-forged tattoo. Unless mademoiselle has one hidden somewhere secret on her person. His eyes roved down the length of her, and Séverin had a great urge to snap the man's neck. You're welcome to check, she said silkily. The guard's eyes widened. He straightened his lap, then walked over to her. Laila stretched out her bronze leg for inspection. Séverin counted down from 10. The man reached for her thigh. 7. Laila feigned a laugh as his other hand went for her waist. 4. The second man touched her. Laila drew out a knife and pressed it against his neck, leaving Séverin standing there uselessly holding his knife in his hand. You see what I mean? You just kind of create this false impression that she needs to be saved. Also, did I mention she's hot? And then you just use that to make another character look kind of moronic, so she looks better by comparison. Just to create this impression that she's like a cool, badass babe, which she is not really. Like, there aren't a lot of scenes where she actually fights or anything. Also, I mean, debatable whether or not you enjoy the hot babe pretending to want sex to infiltrate a place. Personally, I find that trope very old and tired, but to each their own. But anyway, yeah, it's always just like this. Other characters are sometimes just made to look foolish just so she can look better. And most characters just keep hyping her up for no reason. All the time, and there is never a moment where someone calls her out on anything. Even the bad guy thinks she's awesome. Moment from book 2. Ruslan beamed. As they danced, he held his injured arm close to his chest, though he was no less graceful because of it. His Babel ring caught the light, and for the first time, Laila noticed a bluish tinge to the skin. His hand looked far too stiff. Does it hurt? His eyes softened. Do you know? You're the only person who has asked me that. I wish there could be more people like you, mademoiselle. This is the main villain! The villain is just like praising her, telling her how the world needs more people like her. And I would like to insist none of these scenes would be bad on their own. Of course you can have a bad guy who thinks your main character is cool and everything. It's just the accumulation. Every character sings her praises. There even is a moment, I think it was in book 3, where most of the characters are just like trapped in an illusion because it's like auditory illusion, and Laila doesn't see it because she's forged, so apparently it doesn't work on her. And Enrique doesn't see the illusion either because he plugged his ear because he rightfully deduced that something auditory would happen. And Laila basically spends the scene crying while Enrique tries to save Hypnos, Zofia, and Séverin. And at the end, Enrique goes and just congratulates Laila for being amazing. Laila, said Enrique, you were the only one who wasn't affected by the mind-forged siren music, he said. He made it sound as if it was a good thing. Because she's a goddess, naturally, said Hypnos. It's because I'm forged, said Laila. Manipulation by mind forging only affects normal humans, it seems. She tried to make it sound light, but her voice came out flat. The smile dropped from Hypnos' face. You're more than human, said Enrique, reaching out and taking her hand. And if you weren't, we'd all be strangled to death by those skeletons. Yeah, never mind that it was Enrique who actually saved them, but... And I'll keep saying it until I'm blue in the face. The problem is not the scenes themselves. It's just a constant throughout all of the books. Every character sings her praises, and the ones who don't are just portrayed as unreasonable. And I can really only think of 2 characters who are not the biggest fan of her. First of all, her father, who is portrayed as a monster. Rightfully so, by the way, but he just doesn't like her for reasons beyond everyone's comprehension. And probably because she was forged, and after deciding to do it, he just didn't like it anymore. So he told her she was unreal and also just refused to comfort her when she was bleeding after falling from a tree once when she was a kid. And I think he also like burned her favorite doll or something. So completely portrayed as an unreasonable monster. Again, he is, absolutely, but yeah, just this is the representation we have for people who don't like Laila. And the second one is Eva, who is just portrayed as this completely unreasonable, catty woman who wants to fight Laila for a man. And Laila refuses to stoop to her level. But of course, Eva ends up changing her mind when she realizes just how kind and forgiving Laila is. And after that, she became so much more pleasant. So again, people who like Laila, cool. We like them. People who don't like Laila, just completely unreasonable. Even whatever deity rules this entire universe just decided that she had to become one of them at the end. Because she's honestly so freaking perfect, I am surprised they had to play the divine lyre in the first place for the gods to just decide that she needed to become a goddess herself. What were they waiting for, really? Anyway, rant over, back to being constructive. To me, I feel like the advice, give your characters flaws, exists to avoid making characters like Laila. But I would say you don't necessarily have to start creating a list of flaws and nasty traits for your character, because that can just leave you with a character as empty and frustrating as Laila. Personally, I think it actually takes work and a lack of self-awareness to create a character like Laila. Like, you really just have to constantly remind your reader how perfect they are, how they can do no wrong. Just never punish them for anything wrong that they're doing. You have to just constantly remind the reader how perfect they are. Just like take other characters to lower them so they can look even better. So I would say, as long as you're not doing that, chances are you're not making a character that is too perfect. Also, when it comes to the weaknesses that you can give your characters, something that I personally like is just kind of giving your characters the weaknesses that comes with their strength. Are they kind and caring? Most likely they will struggle not to get walked all over. And yeah, I know it's a little bit of a joke to say like, oh, I have to give my character weakness, I'll make them too kind. But it can be an actual flaws. Like, have you never read about a character that's just too kind that you just kind of want to slap them in the face and shake them? Now, I'm not saying do that. Obviously, don't do that. But it is a weakness. Also, that could give you an interesting character arc where they just have to learn to stand up for themselves. Or another weakness that you can give to a character that is too kind is that they can maybe be a little overbearing and they need to learn to let go. And the other way around works too. Like, you have a weakness for your character, you can just like think of the strength that comes with it. For example, they're rude and a little bit crass. Well, chances are they'll also be brutally honest, and maybe another character can benefit from their no-nonsense attitude. Are they charismatic and a natural leader? Maybe sometimes they struggle to take into account someone else's opinion. Or hell, personally, I'm a big fan of the goody two-shoes character that's just getting pushed to their limits. Just have a little can-do-no-wrong character who's just like being pushed to their limits and just start showing teeth. Like, you can have so many interesting scenes and questions around that one character. Like, what does it take to push them off the edge? Like, what does it take to make them snap? And also, how much can they take? Are they going to come back from their snapping? How much is the snapping? Do they go to the bad guy? Do they just become nasty? Will they ever get back to being the goody two-shoes? Like, so many arcs, so many possibilities. And I think that may have been the attempt with Laila, because there is a moment where it feels like Séverin just pushes her too far, so she just has the hardest time forgiving him, and sometimes she is a little bit harsh with him. But at the end of the day, even when she does show teeth, even when she does start being a bit harsher with him, she's always shown to be 100% in the right, and he is like completely in the wrong. And she just never goes too far in what she says, and the story will always just completely side with her. But no, I feel like you just, at some point, need to let them stoop a bit lower. Show them get dirty, show their limits. Just let them drop the can do no wrong attitude for a bit, and just let them be wrong. So yeah, to me it's just kind of about how you frame it, how you frame that character, and don't get cold feet when it is finally time for them to show their weakness. Don't try to save it, don't try to justify it. Yes, explain it, But don't side with her. Just like be this neutral observer who's just like, well, personally, I don't think they're right, but that's just how they handled it. But yeah, that's why I don't necessarily subscribe completely to the give your characters flaws advice. Because my problem with Laila is not that she doesn't have a list of flaws, it's just that the story will just completely every time bend over backwards to make sure that she's perceived as being cool and right and that she just cannot do no wrong. Also, did I mention she's hot? And at the end of the day, the book just almost kind of feels like a pretense to show us how amazing she is in every way. It just kind of ends up being a little bit of the Laila show. So, yeah, I do think she's precisely the type of character that this piece of advice exists to prevent. But I also don't think that this piece of advice is necessarily the solution to avoid a character like Laila. To me, it's all about the nuances. Like, yes, give your characters limits, give your characters weaknesses, but to me, as long as you don't make the whole world just kind of exist to prop up one character, I think you'll be fine. So, while I don't necessarily agree with give your characters flaws, I will agree that please do not write a character like Laila. And if you're wondering, did she really decide to write a whole entire video about writing advice just so she could take one last shot at Laila before dropping the Gilded Wolves? Listen, she deserves it, okay?